What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of my HLTV Fantasy. Today we are looking at IEM Cologne 2023 playoffs. First of all, I'll go through some of the lineups I've had in the past or built for partner games. So this is for the group stages of Cologne. Ended up being not very good, worse result than either of the previous events in the leaderboards. In the actual games. 9-10 was fine in the end. After having a really poor first game, he did quite well against Gamer Legion, although they lost, so ended up being positive. Yabi was the real problem point for me, didn't really deliver to his price at all. And of course, both Heroic and Vitality lost their last games, which cost me a good amount of points. If you want to look at the best lineup, it ended up being like a double G2, double Lens, because, well, they went 3-0. The interesting part, I guess, is that Staven is the most expensive player, and he was a one-off. But I mean, Staven just had a good overall event here, so he wasn't the best lineup. This is for one of the partner games. In the end, Xantares had to be in your lineup for this to be a win for you. I can, of course, show you like the best lineup. Yeah, Xantares was a really good. Art Frost actually also did super well, I think. Probably Eternal. I didn't even look at the last game at all, so probably Eternal Fire just kind of got beaten by Spirit in the finals. But this was in the end the best lineup for that. And this is for an event that's about to start in around about half an hour as I'm recording. Not very interesting lineup. I think Mir has potential to be pretty good, and he was by far the cheapest player for VP, so I think there's good potential of getting points there. James is of course good. Some decent options for BNE, especially Rigon has been pretty good online, and then Keto as like a headshot machine kind of player. I think role-wise also works quite well, except for Mir, who we don't know much about. This is from a very low sample size, so don't think about it too much. He's not probably going to be a 27.3% support player. Yeah, let's get into the main part of the video, which is Cologne playoffs. This is how the bracket is seeded. If you don't play much fantasy and you want to know how this works, because ENS and G2 of course are gonna have less games to get points. So there's some compensation for that in 6 points being awarded to any ENS or G2 player that you have in your lineup. Generally speaking, that's not very good. Like, I don't want to go ENS or G2 here because the potential for points is just lower. Like, if Vitality or Heroic make it to the finals, they're already getting quite a lot more points than if ENS or G2 make it to the finals. They get 6 points of padding, but that does open them up for good budget options such as maybe Hooksy or Snappy, because we kind of just hope that they don't go negative. And if they're getting 6 padding points for the round, that's the same as going not negative. But yeah, essentially, well, C9 could be a contender here if they get Exile, but I still believe Vitality are favored. Especially because Axel hasn't played the event with C9 yet. Like, if he comes in for playoffs, there could be some kinks to figure out and such. And I do think Vitality is just an overall stronger opponent, even though they lost here against G2. And kind of same goes for Heroic. I think Astralis are looking very strong. I still think Heroic are the best team in the world, or at least the second best team in the world. I wouldn't gamble on Astralis here, even though I think it's not as one-sided as it's been for a long time. And then I want to go for one of the budget options from ENS or G2. I do think Snappy is a better fragger than Hooksy is for sure, but 10,000 is a big difference. It's like the difference of getting, I guess, what could be a good example? I don't know. DR Sanpayus, I guess, is pretty close in price, but there's some you have to make sacrifices if you want to go for Snappy, I think. But it's for me just a double heroic, double vitality. I think it's kind of boring, of course. But honestly, G2 picked a lot. Of course, vitality and heroic also picked a lot, but a lot of Apex as well, who I'm not sure I even need if I go for like a Hooksy or Snappy. Hooksy was quite highly picked as well. Hooksy actually didn't have the worst event here. Like, he had some maps where he was even performing. This is a different tournament. Yeah, like a 0.93 for Hooksy is like overperforming by a 0.1. And he's only, in my eyes, going to play one series against heroic. How bad is he gonna be in that series is the question. It's like, how bad is Hooksy gonna be versus heroic versus how bad is Ens gonna be versus vitality? I think Ens vitality could be a lot more. For some reason I think Snappy is gonna do better. I'll try and make a Snappy lineup, and I want to see what that would even look like. I think out of the heroic options, Tessus jumps out to me because he's actually had from what I've seen, a pretty good tournament. Like, I think he played quite well for heroic this event. The same goes for Magisk. I was pretty impressed with how well he's been playing for vitality. Like 413, it becomes very weird because if you go Apex, you have like way too much money. If you go Flames, you only have money for Shush, who I'm not that convinced of in like a playoff setting. He's usually not the best playoffs fragger. What do Saibu lineups look like? I of course should maybe check that out as well. Like if I go Snappy, we can get a Yabi, not quite a Cadian. And Yabi's had, of course, a bad tournament so far, so maybe I want to avoid him here. Tessus and Shush, the most picked heroic options. Like, I do want Magisk. I don't think this is feasible in any way, really. Yeah, not really. Unless you go for Hooksy, maybe. Even then, you are not really looking that good. You can't go Magisk Saibu in reality. I do like the idea of Snappy. How good is Snappy be in this event? Like a 0.97. Okay. Just trying to see how well he does against the better opponents sometimes. It's not that great. It might be worth it to get like... I'm pretty sure you can get this right. Yeah, with Hooksy. So like this might just be better than going for Snappy and a more budget heroic option, because I don't want to go for a more budget vitality option. Flamesy had a pretty good event, right, so far? I'm pretty sure Flamesy's had a decent event at least. Actually a really good event so far. What about Spinks? Spinks not that much for this event, but he's also had more experience with vitality and such. Like Spinks would be more safe as a pick to me, but like money wise, where do I find the 3 grand if I already have Tessus? It's hard. I don't think Stavn is worth it for me. He's a really good player and a consistent fragger, of course, but I guess I could just take a look at like general prices. So G2, I was looking at this, there's like some players who I would be interested in if the format wasn't so unforgiving. Like, it's single elimination all the way. You play one game, we expect one game from like a Hunter. He's not gonna get that much more. Like, he's of course gonna be a lot better than Hooksy, expectedly, but it just feels like you're wasting a lot of your funds if you're going for like a Hunter, when you could just play it kind of by the book I guess is what I'm thinking here. C9 assets just too expensive. There's some decent cheap options with, for example, so boss really pop off, but Astralis like against heroic. If I wanted to, I could go for like a gamble. It would be that I would go for like double vitality, double G2 and 1x Astralis even. That's like an option, but I honestly think this is just the best lineup for this event from the offset. Of course, you know, it's a low sample size event. Like one pop off, like let's say like a Modern has a really good event, a really good match here, but they and still lose. Modern could be a must-have as he's kind of cheap as well. There's like decent possibility of that happening. Has he had a good event? Not even really, but he of course sometimes has these like things where he just kind of pops off. He's a potential fragger, but to me this seems like a safe bet in that I can just go Hooksy Noob, essentially. Where's Noob? Here. I can just go Hooksy Noob. Take the tank some points. It's safe for the standings. Yeah, I think this is just the way to go. Main op on KDN. Do we have other than that? This is actually an interesting problem with this, is that role-wise we don't have any like obvious picks. Has Flamesy entered as much for Vitality as for OG? I don't think so. I'm not that convinced that entry is that great for him. Multifragger used to be, I think, on this table here, like multi-kill rounds per whatever, if I'm not mistaken, but nowadays I guess you have to just kind of go by this. Flamesy has the highest multi-kills. I guess we can go multi-kill Flamesy. Tesses to me, oh yeah, IGL is a role we can use, of course, on one of these. I think it's probably Tesses. Like, it's not that good because honestly we're getting a lot of 2-pointers, I think, here. I don't think heroic are that dominant here. It's still probably good enough that I'd rather go for that than another role. Eco-friendly actually kind of decent for him. I didn't know he uses that much, that many SMGs. Hooksy, of course, more. Hooksy, does Hooksy have as high of a... No, okay. I was like, does he have as high a eco-friendly rating as Noob? Not quite. Magic support. Tessa support. And so the percentages are sometimes just kind of... They don't really match up with what the actual percentage is of those rounds. Of course, I know like it doesn't have to match up either, but it's just an interesting point. You could go Magisk Leader if you believe in the Vitality matchups more. I do believe in Heroic, honestly, more. I think I want to go IGL Tessus and then Magisk. Support. Like based on percentage, it's not, it's like a weird one. I suppose support is just the best on the roll. It's, as I said, role-wise, having a lot of these silvers is not always the best because it's hard to find the best roles. this seems like decent rolls. Let's go for this. It's also like, yeah, it takes into account the fact that we are expecting to win games, and that helps. Like if Magisk, for example, with support, if it's assist, survived, or traded, like survived is a big part of that to me. Like if Magisk just lives a lot of rounds, he's gonna get a high support rating. Okay, boosters. Fuxi, of course, only plays one game. We expect him to bottom the scorecard on that one game, at least on one of the maps. KST. How many boosters do we get to use? 2, 4, 6, 12, 13. So we don't get to use 5 boosters. It's always the same, like pretty tough. I think KDN doubling up his, like, I want to always try and get 5 points from this, so I just use it on the booster or the role where I think the highest potential for 5 points is at. I think that's probably here. This has a really nice rating for and nowadays, because of going for the leaderboard, because it's once again like the start of the season, I guess we go for like the best boosters first to some extent, because we want to always get the 5 points if it's possible. I think that makes sense. So you kind of just go for the best booster straight away. Flash Assist is not a bad booster here for KDN, but I think we just hope for the 2-0 and use that. Assist seems to be by far the best one for you. And what is the best booster for Magisk? There's a lot of like decent boosters for him. You can kind of choose between Avenger, Nade Kill. What else was there? There's one more. Top of scorecard. We can pick top of scorecard here. That's fine. Flamesy slightly higher percentage wise, but we can definitely see Magisk getting one map where he's the top of scorecard. It is a risky one. Maybe you'd actually go for Avenger rather than that. And then Tessus doesn't, or Flamesy get that. But I think it makes sense to me. This makes more sense because like there's Saiwu on the server. Like Vitality, the problem is there's Saiwu, Spinks, Flamesy, Magisk all capable of topping the scoreboard. So, but okay, I think this is probably it for this lineup. It's similar to my previous lineup in the way that we have double heroic, double Vitality, and the cheap option. It's actually formatted quite similarly. The difference is that we don't have Zaiwu Apex, instead we have Magisk Flames. I think, well, did I have another Flamesy? Didn't I have already one Zaiwu lineup? I did. This was a good Zaiwu lineup to me. Like this seemed like a pretty good Zaiwu lineup. There were just some better options apart from 1-2 in the end. I've had 2 Zaiwu lineups. I think Zaiwu has been decent. Of course, the points don't. You can't compare these points. There's a different amount of games and all sorts of things. But what I've kind of learned is that Zaiwu is still insane, but the support staff are also fragging quite well so far. So players like Magisk, Flames, and Spinks, and even Apex are better options. So I think Zaiwu is just a case of, can I fit him in without making too many big replacements? And sometimes it's possible. For example, I think this was a decent lineup for sure. Like when we got the cheap Mongols options, either 910 or Hasteka, to me it was like, I probably want to go for Zaiwu. Here, the cheap option would be Huxi, but then you would still have to have Apex. I'm quite happy with this lineup instead, at least for this event. Avantadian Tessus, yeah. Oh yeah, I'll just share one fun tidbit. I don't know if this has ever happened to me, but before, but Zaiwu didn't have any of his boosters trigger. Like I used carry against Mouse because I thought Mouse would at least make it a bit competitive. But honestly, Vitality just crushed Mouse in 2 maps, and Zaiwu didn't have time to get the carry booster. So if there would have been more rounds, I'm sure he would have gotten the 3 kills needed for it. But unfortunately, that didn't trigger. Best booster. I don't think G2 won many pistols in that matchup. So unfortunately, Zaiwu didn't get best pistols either, and then Mr. Consistent didn't quite trigger against OG. OG had a better idea of what I thought. Also, Yabi didn't have his boosters trigger, but almost all the other boosters did trigger, which is so funny to me. But yeah, let's hope for slightly better boosters. It's not like worst boosters ever, but we can hope for slightly better. But okay, that's it for this video. If you have enjoyed this video and want to see more of this kind of content, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. If any changes happen to this lineup for whatever reason, I will post them on my Twitter, but that's unlikely to happen here. I don't think there's going to be many big changes. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.